The North was never gentle. Cold winds carved the cliffs of Scandinavia long before kingdoms were born. The sea was dark, unpredictable, alive with danger. Survival here was not guaranteed. And yet, from this harsh world, a civilization rose that would shake Europe. When people imagine Vikings, they see warriors, axes raised, shields locked, ships cutting through fog. But they forget something powerful. They forget the women. On the rocky shore, as longships disappeared into the horizon, she stood watching. Not fragile, not uncertain, but composed, her posture straight, her gaze steady against the northern wind. Her clothing was practical, layered in wool and fur, secured with beautifully crafted brooches of silver and bronze. Her hair, often braided with care, reflected status and identity. Strength was not hidden. It was worn with pride. Viking women were not decorations in history. They were pillars. Life in a world of ice and iron. In Viking society, survival depended on cooperation. When men sailed toward England, Ireland, or distant rivers of Eastern Europe, women remained behind to manage everything: land, livestock, trade agreements, family protection. A household was not small. It was an economic engine, and the woman at its center controlled it with intelligence and authority. Unlike much of medieval Europe, women in Viking society could own property, they could inherit wealth, they could request divorce. That alone tells us something. This was not a silent role. This was power. The discovery that changed history. For generations, historians believed high-ranking Viking warriors were always men. Then came the grave discovered in Birka. The burial was filled with weapons: a sword, arrows, shields, even gaming pieces used for strategic planning. It was clearly the grave of an elite military leader. For over a century, it was labeled male, but modern DNA analysis proved otherwise. The warrior was a woman. That revelation didn't just change one story, it forced historians to rethink assumptions about Viking society. Courage did not belong to one gender. Leadership did not belong to one gender. Respect was earned, not assigned. Beauty in strength. When we talk about Viking women, we are not talking about fantasy characters. We are talking about real human beings who lived in one of the most demanding environments in Europe. Their beauty was not fragile. It was defined by resilience. Skin weathered by wind, hands skilled in craft, eyes that had seen storms and survived them. Adornment mattered in Viking culture. Jewelry was not just decoration, it was identity. Silver arm rings, intricate brooches, beads traded from distant lands. These were signs of status and connection to a vast world. Because the Vikings were not isolated, they were global. Not just raiders, but builders of networks. From the coasts of England to the rivers of Russia, Viking trade routes stretched thousands of miles. They reached the Byzantine Empire, they reached the Middle East, they reached North America centuries before Columbus, and wherever they settled, women played a central role in establishing stability. They maintained culture, they preserved language, they raised the next generation of explorers and rulers. Without them, expansion would have collapsed. The inner world. Belief and identity. Before Christianity spread across the north, Vikings followed Norse mythology. They believed in gods like Odin and Thor, deities of wisdom, thunder, and war. But they also honored powerful female figures like Freya, associated with love, war, and destiny. This balance of masculine and feminine power shaped their worldview. Strength was universal. Honor was universal. Destiny belonged to all who were brave enough to claim it. The myth versus the reality. Hollywood often exaggerates the Viking image, turning them into one-dimensional barbarians. Yes, they could be violent. Yes, raids were brutal. But they also had laws. Assemblies called things where disputes were settled publicly. Systems of compensation. Rules of honor. They were not chaos. They were structured. And within that structure, women held influence that many other medieval societies denied. The end, but not really. By the 11th century, the Viking Age was fading. Christianity spread. Kings consolidated power. Raiding declined as trade became dominant. But the legacy remained. Normandy in France, named after the Northmen. Cities founded. Bloodlines spread. Cultural influence woven into Europe's foundations. The Vikings did not disappear. They transformed. Why their story still captivates us. Maybe it's because they represent something timeless: adventure, risk, ambition, but also partnership. Because behind every ship that crossed the ocean was a world sustained at home. Behind every legend was a life built on cooperation. The Viking woman standing on the shore was not waiting to be rescued. She was part of the reason the ship existed, part of the reason the crew sailed, part of the reason the civilization endured. And that is far more powerful than myth.
Hi, this video is for educational purposes and was edited and structured by me using AI tools.